In today's video, we are doing a giant turbo shootout of street performance slash tow friendly turbochargers, easy to install.
Today we're going to test 4 turbos on an 05 Dodge. All 4 of these turbos are cheaper than a stock turbo from Cummins, and all of them kick its butt in this test.
So this truck is a 2005 Dodge Cummins. It does have a built transmission, so it's not going to break on us on the dyno. Also has a cold air intake. Other than that, this is a stock 230,000 mile truck. We have 4 turbos, each one gets 2 tests. The tests are first a stock tune. No power, nothing added, literally the factory spec tuning.
So then we're going to run all 4 of these turbos with a max effort tune with the stock fueling components. So this is just the maximum power we can get via tuning with the stock components and the stock turbo or the 3 upgraded turbos. Compare all the numbers and give you the data.
Alright guys, so the 4 turbos we used were first the bone stock turbo that came on this 230,000 mile truck. Then we have a 60mm version of the HE351, then a 62mm version of the HE351, then a Borg Warner 362 SXE. So we can see here, this is the torque curve. The yellow line's a torque curve. The green lines are the horsepower curve. Quickly, the solid line is the stock turbo. There's 2 lines up here. The dots are the 6067. The shorter dash is the 6267, and these long dash is a drop-in Borg Warner 362. So right off the bat, we can see spool-up times are very different. The spool-up time for the stock turbo is the best. It always is. The smallest turbine, smallest compressor, it's going to react the fastest. Next, surprising to me, is how close the 6267 and the 6067 are. They spool up almost identical, really quick here, and then they just do really well. While the Borg Warner, being the largest turbine side, is the slowest to come up. Not surprising there. The horsepower, same thing, stock turbo. The 2 HE351s that we make, the 60 and 62, and the Borg Warner again is being the slowest. Again, this is a stock tune, but there are some power differences. So looking here at peak torque, let's check it out. So peak torque on the stock turbo is 612 foot-pounds. Peak torque on the 6062, 614 pounds. The actual winner of this is a 6267 with almost 630 foot-pounds of torque. And the lowest one is the 62 Borg drop-in, which that's probably has to do with it, if the stock tune isn't driving it hard enough. It definitely has capacity to make more power, but in the stock tune, it made the least amount of torque at this kind of peak area, which is interesting. Horsepower-wise, let's go over here to the green areas. All right, peak power is not that big of a spread up here. The stock turbocharged peaked out at 301 horsepower. The 6062 351 turbo did 304. The 62 67 did 309. And the Borg drop-in did 308. So we're talking as 8 horsepower from worst to best. Not a huge spread there, but again, all of these turbos have more capacity than the stock tuning will allow. What I find interesting in this comparison is even though the peak numbers are not that hugely different, if I'm picking a turbo for a stock truck, I kind of like the 6267. I would have guessed the 6067 would have been my pick, but looking at the data here, the 6267 has a clear torque advantage all the way through this run. Horsepower as well, it's just a little bit higher. In this fuel-limited stock tuning, it actually is my preferred turbo. Yes, we have a spool penalty down here, but that's not going to be as noticeable as you think when you have a loaded truck, you have a trailer, or even driving around. Yeah, you may notice a little bit, but you'll notice this more. And so it's just interesting to me that even in a stock fuel application, that the modified turbo did so well. I am curious now. Let's look at some like boost and EGT numbers, kind of take a look and see the turbos perform that way. All right, so here's the EGT pulled up for the stock tune with all the different turbos. It's very interesting to me. There's actually more data here to analyze than you might think. First off, you'd see, well, the stock turbo just destroys everything as it spools up faster, it has the least EGT because it gets the boost in fastest, and the worst is the Borg drop-in 362 because it's the slowest to spool. And that's all very true. But in this simulation here, this isn't exactly like pulling a trailer. It's kind of like pulling a trailer. It's kind of a quick blip, a quick pull. What I find interesting is this section here in the tow area. We're talking 2,000 to 2,400 RPM. Notice the slope of the stock turbo. It's constantly climbing the entire time and climbing quickly. The modded 351s, the 60, 67, and 62, 67 climb and then just kind of flatline. They just kind of hang out here with the 6267 doing the best. It actually holds the best EGT control across this range. This is like when you're in a load, the turbine of the stock turbo is a little bit small and it's not going to give you the EGT control even at stock fueling that one of these will. And you can know that because the slope is continually climbing. So let's look at the temperature increase over that 2000 to 2400 RPM kind of peak towing window. The stock turbo starts at 1086, it's in first place. The 6067 comes in 1127 degrees, the 6267 is at 1114, and the Borg Warner is at 1163, kind of hot, but again, there may not be enough drive to drive that turbine with this stock fueling level. As we bump up to 2400 RPM, the stock turbo has climbed a little bit here. We're basically 1200 degrees. The 6067 is at 1202 degrees, so right close. The 6267 is at 1173, so you know it's the winter now, and the Borg is at 1259. So the stock turbo gained 114 degrees in this window. The 6067 gained 76 degrees in this window. The 6267 gained 60 degrees over this time period, and the Borg gained 96. So of the modded turbos, the Borg was the worst, and the 62 again is the best, which again, I'm kind of surprised. I would have guessed that with this limited fueling, the 6067 would have been best, but according to this, I'm still kind of liking the 6267 based on the numbers here. All right, one last thing I find very interesting about this EGT graph, which I'm sorry to spend so much time here, it's just fun for me to look at this. Look at the EGT across all of them. They're all right at 1200 degrees, the minus the 6267. I am just surprised that the 6267 I feel is a better turbo for stock tune than the 6067. It kind of blows my mind. So you're 1201 degrees for the Borg, you're 1201 degrees for the 6067, you're 1200 degrees for the stock turbo, you're 1179 for the 6267. So EGT, again, 6267 is my pick here. Let's look at some boost and drive pressures and see if we can make sense of why these turbos are acting the way they are. All right, guys, I got the boost and drive pulled up. I have the boost in blue, drive in orange. Okay, this is kind of interesting to me. First off, sorry about this mess over here, but please realize the wastegate on these turbos is controlled by the stock tuning, and when it opens it up, it does weird things, minus the Borg Warner because it does not utilize the stock solenoid. It has a boost-driven actuator, so it's a little bit different, but these ones are kind of messy. But before this happens is where the interesting stuff to me happens. Peak boost is limited by the factory tuning. It's around 31, 32, 33 psi, somewhere in there. You can see the blue ones here, all the HE351 turbos hit pretty much the same amount of boost, and then it drops. This is a wastegate, here's a 6067 wastegate, and the stock wastegate. You can see the corresponding drops in drive pressure. This is a 6267, wastegate opens, 6067 wastegate opens, and stock turbo wastegate opens. Notice how much quicker the 6267 gets to the opening point compared to the 6067 over here, and again how much faster that is compared to the stock turbo. It just shows the efficiency of how quickly that big turbine can drive a compressor. It shows that we're getting there way faster with the 6267. Also notice how much lower the drive pressure is compared to the peak boost. This happens at a way lower drive pressure than the stock turbo. It's because that efficient turbine wheel can just move the exhaust so efficiently, drive that compressor way harder, and it really pairs well with this 62mm compressor. Because the 62mm compressor is moving more air than the 60mm, that boost happens faster. Again, I'm surprised at how well the 6267 works in a stock tune. I would have bet the 6067 would have beat it a little bit everywhere because that smaller compressor is lighter, it'll come up quicker, but the reality is in these runs is that little bit bigger compressor wheel is moving a little bit more air, and it just performs a little bit better. Not a lot, but a little. And definitely better than stock turbo, and again I do think it's better than the Borg drop-in at this power level because this is just a little bit more turbo than the stock tuning really seems to like. One last thing to notice in this boost to drive ratio graph is here in the mess. Even when the computer is trying to dump drive to get that boost, notice how close the boosts are. It is limiting boost to where it wants. These are all right around the same level here. There's quite a big difference in boost to the drive. So the 6267, you see it opening and closing, that's what it does. But this average is way lower than the average of the stock turbo. So this is why you're seeing this power difference up here. We have a lower average drive pressure, even though we have a very similar boost pressure. So That's always happens. If your drive drops, boost is the same, you get power up top. So just kind of something interesting to look at when you're doing these comparisons. All right, guys. That stock test was fun and it was very interesting, but I'm way more excited to see what kind of power this thing can actually make.
I wouldn't have guessed the 62 was going to win in the stock tune. I thought, no way.
Yeah.
So very surprising.
It was really, really cool.
Did you guys see our ported head test we recently uploaded on YouTube? If not, check it out. The link is in the description below. This truck would be much better with a ported head. But let's get this back on the dyno with a big power tune and see how these turbos are going to perform.
All right, guys, I pulled up a new graph here. This is the turbos on this truck with kind of a max effort tune. Stock components, you know, stock pump, lift pump, injectors, all that stuff. This is kind of maximizing the components you got in your truck without buying expensive injectors. What can you expect with different turbos? All right, power numbers are in. The winner is the drop-in Borg. The Borg did 546 horsepower and made the most, followed by the 6267 at 536 horsepower. The 6067 is like a half a horsepower less, almost exactly 535.9 versus 536.3. And the stock turbo comes in at 511. All of the modified chargers have more capacity than the stock fuel system. What's interesting to me is how close the 60 and the 62 HE351 turbos are, because the turbine side's identical. It's a 67 millimeter turbine wheel and that 9 centimeter housing, and they both have plenty of air for this power level, so they're basically identical. The stock turbo peaks at 511, so it's quite a bit behind, 20, 25, 35 horsepower depending on your turbo. So even with stock components, having a bigger turbo will yield benefits in a max effort tune. All right, I just pulled in the torque values, and it's a little interesting. It's obviously a mirror of the horsepower because you use the torque to calculate the horsepower. The stock turbo comes up fastest, and the other ones are a little bit behind. So peak numbers are interesting. I kind of wrote these down earlier. So the peak number for the Borg drop-in, which is the highest number, came in at 1,191 foot-pounds to the wheels. Pretty sweet for a stock fuel truck. The 62, 67 came in second with 1,176 foot-pounds. The 60, 67 came at 1,170. And the stock turbo came in at 1,144. So they're all very stout numbers. And as you can see, the modded turbos just carry it longer, carry it better. And they're all very similar, happening in the same numbers, same RPM range, because again, these turbos have more capacity than the stock fuel system, which is why they're all so similar. In our next test, when we add fuel, we'll see these numbers start to diverge. I'm very excited to see what happens there. All right, EGT has now pulled in the red lines, and this is pretty telling. You can see with that quick split up of the stock turbo, it's kind of in lead at first, but it quickly falls behind because that turbine is in choke. It cannot handle all the fuel we're throwing at it. And so the EGT on the stock turbo just takes off and just, you know, it climbs faster, stays faster. Well, all the modded turbos are really, really close. Look at these numbers. There's a little bit of variation right here. You can kind of see that the smallest turbo, the 6067, is the hottest. The next one is the 62. Next one is the Borg. But up top, they really kind of converge to basically, I mean, they're really the same up here. So very interesting. All these have lots of fuel, so you're not going to see these numbers plateau for near as long like you did it in the fuel limited setup. But still, there's a huge spread here. Like, let's say 2,700 RPM. Let's take a look right here. We're talking a difference of 1,377 for the good turbos and 1,462 on the stock here. Almost 100 degrees difference right here. So, you know, pretty substantial. Just interesting stuff to look at. Let's pull in some boost and drive and look at that real quick. So we got boost in blue and drive is in orange. And the thing that stands out to me the most is the stock turbo versus the modded turbos. You can see right away the stock turbo is up high, up fast. That big fuel, we're driving it hard and it's pulling away. But then it just flatlines. Look at this boost curve. It just dies. It just hits around 32 or 33 and just lives there. The modded 351s keep climbing and they're doing really well. Very, very similar. Look at the drive here. We're going to look at this at around peak power. All these turbos peaked right around here. And so let's go to 2,700 RPM. That's peak power for the Borg and kind of center. Let's just kind of pull up that and take a look. So the drive to boost ratios on these turbos, this power numbers are these. We got about 60 pounds of drive with 36 pounds of boost for the stock turbo. The 6067 is sitting right around 64 pounds of drive with 41 pounds of boost. It's a little more of both. The 6267 is sitting at 61 pounds of drive, 41 pounds of boost, and the 362 is 54 pounds of drive at 38 pounds of boost. The numbers are worst to best. You get the worst drive to boost ratio with the stock turbo, a little better with the 6067, a little better again. The 6062, 67, I've said that so many times. And once again, the Borg Warner being the biggest has the best boost to drive ratio. It is a 1.42 with the 6267 and 1.48. Something interesting to me in this graph is the stock turbo's boost versus its drive. Look at the boost level here, this very bottom blue line. It's like, we're down 5 to 6 psi compared to the modified 351s. But even at that lower boost, our drive is still way, way up high, like pretty much dead even with the 6267 here. What that tells you is that stock turbine wheel is just done. It cannot flow more exhaust, it is choking, and we have just as much drive pressure, but that wheel cannot convert that pressure into energy to drive the compressor. Therefore, our compressor boost is way down compared to a bigger turbine wheel. I just find that kind of interesting. The next thing I find incredibly interesting is the 6067 versus 6267 drive pressure. They're very similar down low, and up to about 2300 RPM, they're basically the same. But at that point, they start to diverge quite a bit. The 6267 has less drive pressure than the 6067. That's the dash here is the 62, the dot is the 60 millimeter. Now, boost-wise, we're like dead even. So that's interesting because power-wise, we're also pretty much dead even. So we're moving enough air, obviously, to burn and complete. But why? How is boost the same, power the same, and drive different? This is something interesting to me. I don't know if I have the answer for you right now. At first, I figured this is a dyno to variation, a run variation, run to run, but we repeated this test multiple times and we got the same results. So this is a verified result with these two turbos. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, why is the drive higher even though the turbine is the same exact turbine wheel? The only thing I can come up with is in order to make the same exact boost number, we have to be spinning more RPM because our compressor inducer is smaller. Our compressor is smaller all the way around. So we have less air per revolution, so we have to be spinning faster. In order to make the same boost at this RPM, the turbo spinning faster. Why does that create more drive pressure? I don't have the answer to that. I mean, is it just the cycle? I don't know. It's interesting to me. I'd love to know if there's a turbo like Super Genius out there who can tell me why the higher RPM makes more drive pressure, does not have an effect on horsepower, has the same boost, only difference between compressor wheel. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments why you think we're having more drive, same boost, same power. It's just interesting to me. Another thing I find interesting in this boost to drive tables is the S300. The S300 is down on both. We're making less boost, we're making less drive, but it is the power winner of the bunch. It makes the most power. Why is that? Rule of thumb, very rough rule of thumb from our experimenting here in the dyno, is if you're able to drop 2 pounds of drive for every 1 pound of boost, you'll have a neutral. So if you have 500 horsepower, you drop 2 pounds of drive, 1 pound of boost, you still have 500 horsepower. If you can go beyond that 2 pounds of drive to 1 pound of boost ratio, you'll start seeing gains. And in this case right here, we're back to 2700 RPM, the peak boost, or the peak power. Look at the 6267. The 6267 is making 41 pounds of boost and 61 pounds of drive. The S300 is making 38 pounds of boost and 54 pounds of drive. So we lost 3 pounds of boost, but we lost 7 pounds of drive. So we are better than 2 to 1. 2 to 1 would have been 6 pounds of drive. We lost 1 better, so we're a little bit better, and therefore we make a little more horsepower. So it's kind of, like I say, very rough rule of thumb, but something we kind of play with a little bit here. So that's why we've dropped a little bit of boost, dropped a bigger percentage of drive, and therefore we made more power. So, just kind of fun stuff to look at in the data, graphs. We looked at graphs, hundreds of thousands of graphs over the years. Just kind of trends we've noticed. So a little something fun for you to think about.
What are your final thoughts?
So I was surprised at how well the 62 millimeter turbo did compared to the 60. I would have thought that on a stock fuel setting, the 60 millimeter turbo would have done better. But honestly, the EGT control was better with the 62. The spool up was dang near the same. It really won the shootout. The one thing we couldn't test in this test was a stoplight scenario or stop sign. These turbos were already spooled a little bit by the time we got into the run. Maybe not making boost, but they were spinning fast. So if you're at a stop sign or a stoplight, I do believe that lighter compressor wheel, the 60mm, will give you a little bit better response, you know, coming away from, like I say, a dead stop. Now, they both have enough compressor to make as much power as this fuel system will allow. They're basically identical. But I do believe the 60mm will be a little bit quicker, and I can say for sure the 62 will be a little bit cooler. So you just got to decide what you want to do. If you have plans for upgrading further, the 62 is the play.
So let's talk about the Borg 362. It had a little bit less boost. It had a little bit lower drive pressure. It was lazier. It was capable of more. But that small gain in power is not worth the drivability loss you'd have and just the overall pain of installation. That turbo is a little harder to install. You got to put some studs in there. You got to kind of tweak the exhaust a little bit. Those drop-in HE351 base turbos are way easier to install.
All right, so the next time you see this truck right here, we're putting some big fuel after it. Bigger injectors, bigger pumps. We are going to have more fuel than turbo. Today we had more turbo than fuel. Next time, more fuel than turbo. We want to know how hard can we push these turbos, how much power can they make. So stick around for the next video. It's going to be awesome.